Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Dawes County Board of Commissioners voting session. Today's Thursday, June the 18th, 2020. Appreciate your attendance. We'll start out with a roll call. District 1?
Here.
District 2?
Here.
District 3?
Here.
District 4?
Here.
And I'm the chairman and I'm here, so we're all present. If you please stand for a brief invocation and pledge, please. If you would bow your heads, please. Our dear gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this another day and for the many blessings of life. We ask that you give us knowledge and wisdom to carry out the county's business. Anything that we accomplish, we'll give you the honor and glory. For it's in Christ's name we do ask and pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Announcements? Anyone have any announcements? I will announce to the public that we have a special call joint meeting with the city at 9 a.m. on June the 26th, and that'll be here in the assembly room, and we will be discussing Splosh 7. So that'll be a joint meeting with the city on June 26th at 9 a.m. Next up, we have approval of minutes. First up, we have the minutes of the work session held on June 4th, 2020. Is there any additions or deletions? Motion.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Commissioner Nix.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Gaines. Discussion. Hearing none, please vote by show of hands. And that is approved 4-0. Next up, we have the minutes of the voting session held on June 4th, 2020. Any additions or deletions? Motion.
Motion approved.
Motion by Commissioner Satterfield.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Fawcett. Discussion. Hearing none, please vote by show of hands. And that is approved 4-0. Next up, we have the approval agenda to have two changes to the agenda. First up, we have addition of number 5 under new business. The GMRC appointment of Betsy McGriff. We want to move that we need to give that to them tomorrow. GMRC. And second, number 6 under new business, the CGCC grant that you just heard of there just a few minutes ago. So that will be number 6. So I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda with those two changes.
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Fawcett.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Gaines. Discussion. Hearing none, please vote by show of hands. And that is approved 4-0 as well. Anyone signed up for public comment at this particular time?
No, sir.
Okay, we'll move on into zoning. We have ZA 20-01, Roger Eubanks request to rezone 8.09 acres of property located at Highway 136 East, tax map parcel 109-011-002 from RA Residential Agriculture to RSR-MM Residential Sub-Rural Manufactured Moved and RSR Residential Sub-Rural. These are the zoning rules which we will abide by. The Planning Director will present the application and recommendation of the Planning Commission. Then we will hear from the applicant. Then I will open the hearing. We'll hear from those who are in favor of the application. And we'll hear from those who are opposed to the application. Each person wishing to speak will be allotted 3 minutes per our zoning guidelines. Anyone who speaks will need to sign in and give us your name and address on the form we have here. And also, if anyone has donated $250 or more to any candidate, you will need to fill out a form stating so that our clerk has. So, James.
Thank you, Chairman. Roger and Anita Eubanks are seeking to rezone 8.09 acres located off Highway 136 East from RA to RSR and RSR-MM to form 3 lots. They are moving their children from Cobb County. They are moving with their children from the Cobb County area to retire in Dawson County. Their current home is under construction and should be completed in the next couple months. The middle parcel would be occupied by their daughter and her husband, who works for Forsyth County. They wish to have a manufactured home placed on that parcel, which they're requesting that particular piece to be RSR-MM. Their son would occupy the third parcel on the far side, and they would be building a home at a later date. The Planning Commission heard this. They voted to recommend approval of this request 4-0. This property was purchased in 2018, and rezoning to these districts would conform in the future land use map. The smallest tract would be 1.62 acres, and that is the middle parcel. And I'll entertain questions at this time.
Questions for Jameson?
Is there a house on there now?
They're currently building the house, so when they bought the parcel in 2018, it was vacant land.
Other questions for Jameson? Thank you, sir. We may have some more in a few minutes. Is the applicant present?
Yes, sir.
Come on up and tell us what you'd like to do.
Yes, sir. Do I need to sign in?
Yes, please.
Cobb County, I bet y'all can't wait to get out there.
We're so ready. He retires at the end of August too, so. We're done.
I'm sorry to write. Basically, what has happened, we looked for about a year for property up in Dawson County because we liked the community in this area. And we finally found this 8-acre tract in May of 18. It has been my desire for many years to create an area where my family could be around me, to come and end my years here, and to enjoy life with that. We bought this property under the impression that we wouldn't have any kind of concerns or problems out of dividing it for the children. It's being divided because they're using the property to support the purchase of this mobile unit. Once we found out that there was a restriction against the mobile unit, we've been trying to get this resolved. Basically, the reason for having a mobile unit is for cost. My daughter is bipolar. She will be that way for the rest of her life. There's medications that are involved with that she's going to have to pay for and take care of. And my son-in-law is a Forsyth County deputy, and we all know the deputies don't make the most in the world. So for financial reasons, they looked at a mobile home. This is not what you would think of as a trailer by any stretch of the imagination. The home that we are building is built with 2x6 walls. This mobile unit is built with 2x6 walls. It is, in my opinion, almost the equivalent of a stick house. It has sheetrock. It will be finished. It is going to be underpinned. It is going to be landscaped. We have already cut the property so that you will see just the home itself. My daughter, being bipolar, is after me constantly to clean up. So the property is going to be very attractive and very useful. The reason for the request for the zoning, again, is financial, because they need to have a home that they can live in with the salary expectations that he has as a deputy. So that's the reason for the request.
Questions of the applicant? Thank you, sir.
Wait just a minute.
Uh,
Tell me the division. How many acres?
We have 8 acres, ma'am.
809, and then.
Yes, ma'am, and being from this area, you know that there's ridges that run through all of it. And basically, we have found a way to divide it where there's 1.6, 1.6, and the rest of it is going to be on the other side.
Which is 4.84.
4.8, and that's where our home, and it's about 2 months from being completed by Brownhaven.
1.06.
1.66. 1.6.
Oh.
And 4 point what?
84.
When you bought this property, did you have the intentions of dividing this up?
We did buy the property and with the intentions of trying to divide it up. We understood under the existing rules at 18 that we needed to have 2 acres. That's the reason why we bought something that would be 8 acres. Since that time, we have managed, through my wife, to be very persistent, and we have actually had water and a fire hydrant brought down to the property. So we now have public water for all 3 lots. That has been already been brought onto the property, and we are in the process of getting the second meter set. First meter was set about 4 months ago. So we now have public water for all 3 units.
Other questions of the applicant?
Who did you buy this property from?
Sandy Glass was our real estate agent.
And do you know who the sellers were?
I'm gonna remember his name. Powers,
Jason Powers. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was the original owner of the property. We
He purchased it from somebody and sold
And then you purchased it from
it.
him?
We
Yes,
purchased
we
it from him,
purchased it.
yes, ma'am.
And Sandra Glass?
And Sandy Glass.
Was the
She,
real estate-
she was the real estate person.
She was one.
Thank you.
Other questions of the applicant?
But you've been proceeding, doing all this before you know that, what the vote's gonna be on the zoning, is that right?
We have looked into the voting and all for this and what was going on, and we have proceeded with building our home. It is on the majority portion of the 8 acres, and we knew that we could proceed with that portion of everything by doing that. We have done a lot of dirt moving, and we've done a lot of clearing and everything in order for the house to be set in place with a nice yard and a nice lot. And we did that to get ready for our house. What we're asking the board to do here is to approve it so that we can bring in my daughter and have a place for her to stay.
Did you clear cut this property?
No, ma'am. I will say that we did take out 50-something trees, but that's probably less than about 30% of the trees on the property. But we have turned the lot into a very nice place. We have a yard in the front and a yard in the back. And if you've driven down 136 and you see a nice grassy area, that's ours.
Is it just one driveway?
Yes.
Yes, sir. It will always be one driveway. DOT has told us that because of the visual rules that they require on that you couldn't put another driveway on 136.
And at the end of the day, this is, we call it our family property, you know. It's gonna go to grandchildren, great-grandchildren.
This is set up so that this will always belong to my descendants.
Other questions of the applicant?
Is there some kind of hardship involved in this with your daughter, your bipolar daughter?
Man, it is a situation where her medical bills are about $250 a month for the medicines and all that she will take all of her life. And again, her husband is a Forsyth County deputy, and I'm sure y'all have a very good idea what he makes. And we do not want them to be in a situation where they're financially burdened. We want them to be in a situation where they can have a good life and enjoy life. So instead of trying to build a stick home, which would normally be the case, they have chosen to accept this smaller unit in order to have a mortgage that is very livable.
Is it single or double?
Double.
It is a double wide, ma'am. I've got a copy of it if you'd like to see what it looks like,
That's okay.
but basically it is,
It's about 2,000 and something square foot. It will be a nice size for them.
yeah. And again, the thing that they were very concerned about is it has 2x6 walls, it has sheet rock. When it's finished and done, other than the roof line, you probably will never be able to tell that it was a mobile home to begin with. It is going to be underpinned, and that's already all set up in the arrangements for it to come in.
Other questions of the applicant? Thank you. We may have some later. At this time, I'll open up this hearing. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of the application? Anyone here to speak in favor of the application?
Except for us.
Anyone here to speak in opposition to the application?
I have a question.
Question.
Can I-
Come on up here. Sign in, give us your name.
And I'm not here to represent the postal service, I apologize. Very much sure in here, I got home and someone had burglarized my home, so I was sort of. My name's Stacy Mullins, and I just have a question about this, and obviously you guys have, I've been up here before because we're having an issue with some property that we have that's zoned RA at this moment. I just wanted to ask when this couple applied for their building permit, if I can ask that question, when it was approved to be built? I guess that's a question for James.
April.
Of last year, 2019?
That was this year,
Yeah, it's this year.
It was applied this year.
Okay. And then my next question is, for the board, I was told by, or actually, so I'll address this to Ms. Fawcett, was told that we were not allowed to have a permit for, or to apply for rezoning, it would never get approved by, she would like know simply based on the fact that I didn't have a handicap child or elderly parents. So I just wanted to bring that back up. And also I have a question, how would this zoning, if it is approved, be different than the 6 acres that was voted against? I don't know the person's name, I know it, but I can't remember it. The people that own the Dairy Queen in Dawsonville that asked for the rezoning, they were going to do the same thing that this couple is wanting to do. So my question to the board is, how would that be different? They were going to have a single driveway, 6 acres, 3 homes, and it was voted against. And there was actually 3 homes, I'm not knocking mobile homes, versus 2 homes and a mobile home. So my question to the board is, how is that going to be different with a single driveway, approximately 1.5 acres more, and it's still going to be 3 homes on 3 lots? So
And
that's my question.
As the parliamentarian, all I will say is this is a public comment opportunity for you to comment,
Sure.
and they can certainly draw some concern from your question perhaps, but I don't know that they have the answers, or it's not an appropriate time for you necessarily to answer questions unless you're.
It's fine, I mean, I just want to bring it up, I'm just like, my thought process is, I see it as maybe an issue for the county later on. That's just the only reason I bring it up, because of what we're going through. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak in opposition to the application? Seeing none, I'll close this hearing. What is the pleasure of the board? I do have one question for you, Jameson. Now, you said that this, did I hear you correctly say that this met the future land use map?
It does, yes, sir.
Okay.
Say it again.
It does. This particular rezoning, it calls for RSR in this area. It's residential sub-rural for this entire area that they are looking to rezone this property to. RSR MM is a subcategory that we consider underneath RSR.
So it does fit our zone, future land.
It does meet our future land use map. Yes, sir.
That's-
And I assume that some of the other issues we're having that in the future land use, geographically, a lot of those are still designated as rural agriculture. Is a differentiation. I know that question was asked.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Jameson. What's the pleasure of the board?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Satterfield,
Second.
second by Commissioner Gaines. Discussion.
I'd just like to comment that this is sort of bad timing as far as I'm concerned. And, you know, speaking to her, and I know I'm not supposed to respond to her, but she said some things that really weren't true, but I want them to understand that. I think this is coming in a bad time.
Well, this fits our future land map, which other ones didn't too. But
Now we have a motion and a second for approval. Is there any more discussion? Please vote by show of hands. Let's see here. So we got 2 for approval. How many do we have against? 2 against. I'll break the tie and I'm approved. So it is approved. Next up, we move into new business. First up, we have consideration to move forward with public hearings for land use resolution update to residential agricultural lot size requirement. Jameson, you and our county attorney are going to lead that discussion. We had a discussion in our work session a couple of weeks ago, and we're looking to find some options. It has been documented, obviously, that we have NRA where less than 5 acres, people have been granted permits to build and to construct. Before y'all get into it, I'm going to go over a little survey that I did myself. I conducted a survey of RA parcels on the following roads in Dawson County. Highway 53 West, Will Hall Road, Daniel Drive, Hot Pepper Place, Timberwolf Ridge, Young Place, Duck Thurman Road, Gagliana Drive, Summer Vale, Sweetwater Church Road, Tinsley Chapel Road, Tinsley Road, Bulls Road, Amiclo Church Road, Cowart Road, Deep Creek, Hammond Hester Road, Millsap Waycaster Road, Castleberry Way, Anderson Farm Road, Chumley Road, Toads Road, Pittman Road, Jones Road. Those are all off Highway 53 West, and then I also did a survey on Highway 136 West. There were 441 total parcels on those roads. Parcels greater than 5 acres equal 232 of those 441 parcels. Parcels less than 5 acres were 209. Parcels less than 5 acres that have been built on since 1998 was 76. Parcels less than 5 acres built on prior to 1998, which when this zoning was changed, was 129. There were 14 parcels less than 5 acres that are still undeveloped. And looking through it, it was obvious to be able to see that every year there had been approval for construction on less than 5 acres in RA. It was also pretty obvious to me, looking at it, that the standard had been an 1.5 acre lot in RA had been the standard and the interpretation over the last 20 years. So Jameson, with that survey that I said I would do for the board last week, or 2 weeks ago, I'll turn it over to you and to our council.
Thank you, Chairman. I didn't know if you wanted to go through we collectively talked about this on multiple occasions. And I think it was come to a consensus that there were really kind of 5 options to go through. And you laid that out very eloquently in your email. I don't mind going through those if you want me to.
And I'm happy to do that. This was another late night email. If you had a chance to read it, if you couldn't sleep, I probably helped you last evening.
Yeah, it helped me not to sleep.
Or put you to sleep.
No.
So, you know, again, as we were talking about with the other issue, there's sort of two focus points here, is that there's these people caught in the net, like Ms. Mullins and some others that came forward last week, that there's some interest in how do we deal with those people versus what is the going forward process for ag. And again, I think this dovetails very much with the general, what happens in the agricultural residential district that we discussed with respect to special events permits. But so the immediate need, I think, is determining how do we deal with these people who are in the net, to use the chairman's phrase again. And I think there's three categories of individuals that are in this proverbial net. There's the people out there who don't even know they're in a net because they have somewhere between a 1.5 acre lot and a 5 acre or less than 5 acre lot, but maybe they've never tried to develop, or maybe they even have a house on the property, but they haven't ever tried to transfer it, so they haven't had to come and get a plat, which would be denied under the current, interpretation of current regulations. So those are people who just don't even know they have a problem. There's a second category of people, like Ms. Mullins, who have purchased property with the belief that they could develop it, even though it's less than 5 acres in this residential agricultural district. And then we have a third category of people, and there was another woman who spoke on this with her daughter at the last meeting, if you recall, who hasn't purchased, but she has property that she wishes to separate and divide to allow her daughter to live on in the RA district. So those are the three categories of property owners that we believe are in this net and are needing perhaps some treatment or at least some consideration for how they would be handled. As you may remember, we had this issue come up about a year ago, and Jameson brought forward a proposal to amend the land use ordinance that would have dealt with these issues with respect to splits, how you deal with how many times can you split the property, who can split the property, and so forth. And that was not approved by the board at the time. I only mention that because this, we can Band-Aid again, and we're going to probably be talking about this another time. So I think it's coming to the forefront where we need to try to decide how we want to capture these different property owners in these different scenarios. So I laid out what I perceive as 5 options from one end of the spectrum to the other. There may be others, but I will tell you that James and I haven't come up with others at this point. So the first option is that we continue to interpret the ordinance as has been done by some past planning directors, apparently. And that is allowing people to have less than 5 acre lots and be granted a plat and a permit to develop. That is inconsistent with the way Jameson reads the ordinance and the way we read the ordinance. I don't think it's the legally correct way. But again, I'm giving you the options from one end of the spectrum to the other. So that's an option. Second option is we address it from a splits perspective. And in fact, whatever we ultimately do going forward, I think you may want to talk about splits in some way. Commissioner Gaines and I have spoken about legacy lots, which is a phrase I'm using to refer to, family transfers and gifts perhaps. So irrespective of whether that fixes the people in the net, it may be something we want to talk about, and I think should talk about going forward, because we're still going to have those people, who have a bunch of acreage, and we want the 100-acre parcels to even be able to split it into 5 acre pieces, 50, or I can't do my math, but however many times, So I think that's something to talk about no matter what, but could it be a curative opportunity here? It could. A fourth option would be to create a corrective zoning district. And so the idea here is we have RA that's intended to be 5 acres unless it was somehow otherwise existing as a 1.5 acre tract. So we would create, we could call it whatever you wish, but I'm referring to it as an RA 1.5 that would allow these properties to have a process to be compliant. So if you had a 1.5 up to a 4.99999, they could come in, seek to rezone to this classification. This classification could be built however you would like it to be built. Some might say, well, how's that different than just rezoning to RSR, because that would allow 1.5 acre lot. I would say if we want to allow it as a corrective measure, we would enhance performance standards. So if it's going to be in agriculture, in our land use plan, that's real important, says that it's RA based and we want to protect that rural aspect, then instead of RSR, which may have some lesser standards with respect to buffers and with respect to setbacks, you know, perhaps we enhance those things here, and perhaps we limit what types of, you know, agricultural uses could be on that 1.5. So if you have a 1.5, we may not want them having a house and hogs and chickens because of noise and all those things that could come into play. You know, so livestock might be prohibited, but they might be able to put a house. And they might need to set it back 100 feet from the road instead of 50, or, you know, whatever. And we might even consider enhancing performance standards to the extent these I'll call them substandard RA lots adjoin the 5 acre and more lots. You know, we typically will have provisions like that in the ordinance if you have a residential, a commercial adjoining a residential, that there's some enhanced separation requirements. So we could consider that, so that these people in RA who believe 5 acres are required and have somewhere from 5 and above, that they're not going to be upset and concerned that their property values are diminished because there's a smaller size lot beside them. If we can buffer them in so they can't see and they can't hear, then that would be one way we could address this corrective process. Now, this corrective process and this new RA 1.5, if that's how you decide to go, I would propose it could be merely corrective, and we could allow it to exist and define it for only these properties that existed, you know, as of the date of the ordinance being adopted, or we could give them a 6-month sunset provision to come in and apply for this. There's a variety of ways we could do it, and then ultimately have it be limited. Or you could decide this is a new product that you're going to have a classification that would be going forward available for anybody. And then a 5th process, and I think this made Jameson sweat a lot when I mentioned this, and Dave when I had him on the phone too, is to initiate a county rezoning of all these parcels. You know, and Billy has discovered through his research that there's quite a lot. You saw Elaine Garrett's research as well. So Elaine's did not break it down as much as the chairman did. So the chairman's, I think, gives you a little better snapshot into what kind of numbers, but we're talking about hundreds of parcels. So my idea felt better before it was hundreds of parcels, but the idea here would be we would initiate basically like a map correction type thing, where we pursue the rezoning on behalf of these property owners. We provide them notice, we give them an opportunity to opt out, but explain to them that we're doing it so their property can be developed and can be transferred. And we just take care of everybody, and then we close down that district so it's not available for everybody else to come and apply for, but we use it, you know, purely as a corrective measure. And then, you know, the other end of the spectrum, as a 6th option, is that we don't offer remedy. Here's what the ordinance says, here's how we interpret it. We can't help that other people got it wrong in the past, and you need to comply with the ordinance. So that's sort of from one big end to the other. And so I think we just need some direction on how to move forward with that. You know, and then continue our discussions about agricultural generally with respect to the work session issues as well.
I mean, with the ones that came to us last year and the ones this year, and I guess the ones we're looking at now, yeah, I could see how some of these things happen, because you ride out there and look, there's subdivisions across the street. There might be 1 or 2 lots in a subdivision next to it. I mean, if you ride down Kelly Ridge Road or Coward Road and you got some big acreage and you got a subdivision, then you got some of these lots. So, I mean, I could see if I went and bought a smaller tract, I'd say, yeah, this fits right in. And I think it's like the chairman's shed a lot of this, and I can see how this has happened.
I'd say this particular area, it seems to be growing in that particular area. Like up towards Miss Fawcett, there doesn't seem to be nearly as many of these issues that were created in the past. But this Cowart Road area, Yellow Creek area, that kind of lends itself back to a discussion we've had in the past of character areas and what's already there versus what is on the land use plan. Is, you know, the land use plan now calls that whole area agriculture. Fact is, it's not. The fact is, a lot of it is closer to RSR than it is agriculture. So now if you look up again towards Miss Fawcett's area and the large tracts that are up there, that's clearly delineated that it's not an RSR. And
But there's some close that's
There are,
fussing about this, that I can see
towards
they
you.
would turn it what I would call a subdivision. Yes, real close.
you also have, you do have some less than 5 acre tracts even up that way. I mean, I didn't go down every side road like I did Highway 53, without time. I mean, I've spent many hours doing what I did. But there are, I mean, I didn't go down Crane Road, I didn't go down Bailey Waters Road, I didn't go down all those side roads like I did on 53. I didn't miss a road on 53. But it would be interesting to see, you know, in other areas, I mean, they're obviously there somewhere because there's almost 1,400 of them.
Yeah.
And I only did 209 of the ones that are less than 5 acres that I found in the roads that I actually did. So there's another 1,100 and something somewhere throughout this county. So I think we have to look at, I personally think we have to look at it in a holistic approach. And I appreciate Jameson and our attorney working on some options and to put those together for us to take a look at. I think it's important as a board that we hear from the citizen. That's the reason I'm going to propose that this go to a public hearing, and that we hear from the citizens. You know, maybe this board needs to pick out 2 or 3 of these and hear some comments from the citizens. But we need to hear from them on what they think might be a solution to this issue that, unless we fix it, is going to be an ongoing issue every day, over and over and over again. And I don't want to go down that road. I want to fix it. And we have the opportunity here to fix it. We have options that allow us to fix it. And I think that's the road that I would suggest to the board that we take. Now, I don't know which one of these options is the best option. I don't know. I don't know what the best option is, but there has to be an option in my opinion. And I think that, you know, I'd like to hear from our citizens, especially those that are in this track, into this net, as I call it. Now they've heard some of the options that's been proposed, and we can make sure that they have access to the verbiage that we have at the moment, and hear from them, and as we can continue to work to try to figure out a permanent option, I mean, so that, you know, we can maintain the rural integrity that the county has, especially on that side of town. But, you know, as our county attorney said, I mean, you got people with acreage that they've had for 30 years or 40 years. They're in the net too. If they don't have that thing already platted, they can't sell it. They can't do nothing with it if it's less than 5 acres. So, you know, what I don't want to have happen is people with a bunch of land that becomes useless at some point in time. Well, that's not right. That's not what we should be doing, and so we need an answer to this problem.
We've got, do we know how many, is it on here? How many lots under 5 acres that already have a structure on it
It's on that one from,
that was not platted?
I don't know if we know the platted part.
So it seems like those, they were incorrectly maybe, but they were issued a building permit at some time to build a structure, and so, I mean, is that accurate?
Not necessarily.
Well, it could even be pre-zoning.
Yeah, pre-zoning.
Some of them would have been.
They could be that old.
So, I mean, I guess I'm looking back, if they have a house now, somebody mentioned it, if somebody has a house now that doesn't fit the 5 acres, they legally can't sell it? So why would we not, well, at some point they had to have gotten a business license if it was post.
Building lot, I'm building her.
Building permit, yeah. But
Business lot. That was the last meeting,
That's the other.
previous meeting.
business license, building permits, and
Correct, it all depends on the date it was platted.
so if we've got some of those that were issued a building permit, it seems like we would need to correct those because we issued them a building permit, and it seems like that would be, I'd be okay with just those being a county-initiated rezoning because they're already got a structure on it. I mean, it's already there. I mean, well, we're not going to go tear them down.
If they have a building permit, as far back as we can go, if they had a building permit, we required a recorded plat at that point in time. So if they have a building permit, they have a recorded plat, therefore, according to this ordinance, they're in compliance.
Okay.
We hope they have.
I thought there was an example recently, somebody that sold a house on 2 acres. Oh, it didn't have a recorded plat. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Well, and I don't know that you would say that they're in compliance, but they don't need anything from the county. So, I mean, to your point, I don't think we're gonna go out and start trying to kick people out of homes that
Right.
have gone through the process and been permitted. It's a matter if they're coming and asking us to affirmatively grant them a permit or approve a plat, and it's not in compliance with the ordinance, that's, or they haven't gotten their plat approved, and ultimately will need something even if they don't know they need it. But for those who have achieved everything that could be needed, I don't know that we're pursuing a fix for them necessarily. Now, if we do some kind of global map correction, I would say, yeah, let's rezone them, because then instead of being really a non-conforming parcel, they would become compliant. So I would be careful with the word compliant, I guess is what I'm saying. Is they don't need anything, so we don't have to do anything with them, but we could consider whether we bring them compliant by giving them the zoning.
I mean, we do that sometimes when we change our map, though, right?
Well, that's right, and that's why I equated that county-initiated rezone process to like a map correction. And, some jurisdictions will change a classification, they may have had a PUD, and then they decide to call it, Community District L. And so they rezone everybody and provide notice, and they just change it on the maps. And so that's the concept I was talking about. And so, that would capture those people, to Commissioner Gaines' question, that, did get the permit, they did get their plat, so they don't need anything, but it would still be nice because it would show them then doing the right thing. So when that property owner or that broker looks up to that house next door and says, oh, they're zoned RA and they've got 2 acres, so it's okay for me to sell you this for 2 acres, it would prevent that kind of stuff continuing to happen, because we would have that cleaned up. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to treat those people, but that's not necessarily the people who need us to do something right now.
And I go back to my comments I had last time is to me, there's really 2 issues. Is we got those that are in the situation they're in now and have already made financial investments in land based on historical thought processes, right or wrong. And I think it's reasonable to find a way to come up with a solution to resolve those immediate needs that are in the proverbial net. And then the second issue is, how do we address this moving forward to the mom and daughter situation? I think that we're over here on the left the other day. I mean, I understand that concern, but in the same sense, I think to Commissioner Fawcett's point is we don't want it to be abused. And Angie, council and I have been discussing the legacy lots, and it's a slippery slope, because if you allow a legacy lot and I give my son 2 acres, how do you prevent 2 years from now him selling it to somebody else? And so it's I think the mentality and the compassion is there, but how do we thread that needle to ensure that it doesn't get abused? And that's the challenge and the push and pull that I have in my head. But I do.
Why can't these people come for rezonings? Why do we even have to change the ordinance unless you want it more specific? I just leave the ordinance like it is and have these people come for rezoning.
Well,
What would be wrong with that?
Well, and that is an option, but the only rezoning opportunity they would have would be RSR, right?
Correct.
And so with RSR, it's smaller size lots without any kind of enhanced performance standards, because that's intended to be, a step up in density, I guess, what does that stand for? Sub-rural. So I think it's, so it would just be a matter of, now, if your thought process, they're gonna come ask for that, I'm gonna deny everyone, well, that doesn't solve the problem necessarily, but that could be offered as a path. But the idea of something corrective in RA would be to make it as much like an ag residential as possible, with just this option for it to be a little bit smaller.
So, and I hope I didn't misspoke right there. We do have a zone category between RA and RSR, and that's residential rural estates, and that is 3 acre lots. So we have 5 acre lots, 3 acre lots, and
I'm
then
sorry.
RSR is an acre and a half. Sorry,
No, and I'm sorry, I was focused on sort of those 1.5 and 2 acres, because that's who we're hearing from.
Well, and I think that's where the ambiguity has been created, is in that definition of 1.5, and
Exactly, and that's why I think we would, whatever this corrected process is, I think it would go from 1.5 to 4.999. Now, below 1.5, I don't see anything that would justify anyone believing
you can't do it.
Can't
for health
do
that that's
regulations.
appropriate, you know, and so
Yeah,
I, yeah, if you got some less than, some less than 1.5, I think, I don't think we're trying to help or fix that for anybody. But to the extent there's confusion created, or there was any misinterpretation in the past about that 1.5 reference in the code, then that would be our net definition, is 1.5 to, under 5. And so, again, Commissioner Fawcett, the notion of doing this would be to try to offer these folks a remedy, but still, I would feel strongly that we wouldn't just call it RA 1.5 and just give them their 1.5 acres or 2 acres or 3, whatever, without having some enhanced performance standards, because I think you want to make it as much like ag as possible. And again, also limit some of the uses, because if you look at what all you can do in ag, this is not the place where we want the special event facility,
Right.
or the wedding venue, so it needs to be probably only allowed for a single-family home, and maybe additional buffers and setbacks, so.
The buffer thing, I think that's a reasonable request. If you drive down one of these roads, if the house sits back far enough where you can't even see it, all you see is a driveway, you don't know if they're sitting on 1 acre, 2 acres, 5 acres, 100 acres. So I could see that being definitely something that would help me get there, just because it's shielding everything, and it's not, it just helps mitigate the look of density, unless you're on Google Earth. I'm the only one who got that apparently. All right, so if we move it to a public hearing, then that would allow public feedback on these options or any other potential options that may come forward.
Well, and so that's an interesting question. So, I was contemplating you were going to pick an option that we would go forward, but maybe you're saying it's so undecided that you want to just, there wouldn't, I guess what I'm asking is, would we draft the ordinance? I don't know that you want us to go to the trouble to draft every option for this, because that would be a lot of wasted time and resources, I'm afraid. But I can also see the public saying, well, we're not sure how to comment, because if you're saying there's going to be a split rule, what's that rule? We don't know if it helps or not. If you're going to say we're going to have RA 1.5, but it's going to have enhanced, what does that mean? Because we don't know how to comment on it. So, it's kind of...
Well, I think we can, in my mind, and this is just speaking for me, I think compassion, in my mind, is let's figure out a way to take care of those in the net, and let's address the long-term issues separate. That lends itself to, of the 5 options, I prefer option 3, which allows us to put those constraints and those additional languages in there to limit the impact of additional densities out there, or option 2, but I think option 3 is more constrictive, which I do like, the more constrictive language, because if we just, or a hybrid of the two. We could say you could do 3, but you have so many years, and that would help prevent what we've talked about in the past at the beginning. You can only split it once every 5 years or something, for a long-term fix,
Yeah, and I do think we need to address splits no matter what.
And the definition of subdivision, small, large, medium, I've heard,
Yeah.
how many definitions we got of subdivision?
Yeah, all that needs to be addressed, and go, is it the verb or is it the noun,
Yeah.
We have one consistent definition of subdivision across our land use resolution and our subdivision regulations. But then we have kind of subdivision,
That's what I said.
categories, like minor subdivision.
Yeah, minor.
And
Yeah.
major
Major.
subdivision.
And I'm concerned about a public hearing with COVID and all that. And what if we have more people then we have seats.
Well, at this point, under the restrictions, I believe we can have 50 people without social distancing. You know, we're trying
Without,
to
well,
make
so
it-
they can sit the seats.
We could, yeah, so we would have the ability to put some more people in here for sure.
And when they speak, they can, that's them.
Well, and we can talk about procedures for that if you believe there'd be a huge turnout, because there are some jurisdictions that are doing a lot of, you know, that they have a person who's coming down, wiping down the podium every time, and
Oh,
nobody uses the same pen, and, I mean, so we could certainly adopt some additional protocols if you're concerned about that.
We also just had our 453 kickoff meeting, which it was done partially in this room, and then also virtually, where people were able to attend virtually via Zoom or Microsoft Teams. There are softwares out there that we might be able to explore with Laura to accommodate during these public hearings, which we can do now because
We have the ability.
We'll be able to do that with our new system.
Yeah.
What kind of time frame, if we go through the process of public hearing? I mean,
You have to advertise for a public hearing, which takes what?
we should advertise for a public hearing for 2 weeks.
For 2 weeks, you have to advertise.
So, we have to have our advertisements into the paper tomorrow morning. But we would also want some additional time to work through the direction that this board sends us.
I mean, and really, when you're advertising something, it should be prepared and on
Yes.
file. I mean, that's just that, you know, so we wouldn't be able to hit the advertisement tomorrow because we don't have anything prepared for folks to see. I mean, that is somewhat the benefit of the county initiated rezoning. It would still require a public hearing, but we could do it, you know, in somewhat of an abbreviated process, because otherwise, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe our zoning resolution requires that an ordinance change would go to the planning commission first.
Correct.
Is that right? Is there any option, do you recall, to come straight to the board, or?
No.
Okay. So that's gonna be a little bit longer process.
That only for the county initiative rezoning option.
For the ordinance change, the county initiated, I think we could, if I'm not mistaken, could bring straight to the board, and,
Are we under a time constraint? Is there some kind of something?
We're gonna build a house now.
okay, I see, literally waiting on you, I've already signed paperwork. Like the bank.
Pardon me, I didn't hear you. What?
The bank, I've already signed my paperwork for my loan. They're literally just waiting on somebody to say, this is okay, please build a house. And like, if that takes a longer period of time, I lose everything I put into this loan. So all the days I took off work to go to the bank, all the days I took off work to get it platted, all of those days, I just lose all of that work.
Well, you can see how complicated this is, can you?
I mean, I understand, but I also understand that
Okay.
when we were here last time, she defined RA subdivision as dividing a piece of land. We divided a piece of land, and on the website, it says RA subdivision, 1.5 acres. I have 2, so
We did not I promise you, we did not understand what the website says. And I really and truly think that's one thing that you need to do, is work on what that website says. Because it does say 1.5, and it also says subdivision. We're thinking subdivision. Either way, I think that they need to reword that for sure.
Well, and that's where I get,
That will eliminate a lot of this.
yeah, and that's where I get the if it was black and white, just it is, that's what it is, definitive, and then people went out and bought lots, knowing that that was the case, I would be option whichever one it is. I'm sorry, you made the decision knowing black and white, that's what it was. But with the ambiguity is the reason why, and I think Commissioner Fawcett said before, is, I forgot which the word you used earlier this morning, that, just, I didn't know, so it's okay, but
That's the mantra.
yeah, but I understand that, and if it was very clear cut, and you had that argument, it wouldn't hold water with me, but with the inconsistencies and the number of parcels that the chairman has presented with us today, there's obviously been, if it's 1 or 2, that's one thing, but we're looking at hundreds of these, and so there's been a track record, and we got to draw the line in the sand. We got to fix it, and we got to, these people that are in the current situations, let's take care of it, move forward, and then figure out how we're going to address it moving forward.
And how many are in this situation? Are we just talking about these, how many are we talking about? Because I know in
We
your
don't
email you
know.
said many,
No,
that's it, that's what I know.
We don't know.
So,
You know, I will offer this one thought, and I've seen other jurisdictions do it, it always makes me nervous, but, I mean, if we have, if there's three property owners who have immediate issues, such that going through, which, really is, any way you cut it's gonna be a month process. I mean, really more with the planning commission. I mean, it's.
45 days.
Say again?
45 days.
Okay, 45 days. So, and I don't know if that sounds prohibitively long, or if you go, 45 days sounds great, I don't know, but, I think that's probably the minimum, and that
Yes.
means that everything gets drafted on a dime, and you don't need to send it back with changes or whatever. But what I've seen some jurisdictions do is if, the reason I have concerns with this is because it suggests that you know what your end product will be. But if you know that you're inclined, and you could take a motion and vote to say, we're gonna find some curative fix on these issues, and we're gonna proceed with this, and you're directing me and Jameson to come up with some curative approach, we could consider issuing conditional plats or permits that, is sort of like a provisional until the new thing is in place. And then we would issue them, one after the ordinance is completed. Does that make sense? I mean, it's concerning to me because it suggests that we know our end product before we've had a public hearing, and so what happens if we don't ultimately zone it as would be required, then, I guess they could take the risk of, okay, then you may have to tear your house down.
I want to take the time. I understand your plight. I mean, I really do. But we got to do it right. I mean, and I don't think we can piecemeal this thing
We understand
together.
that, we really do understand that.
Yeah, and that's, I just want y'all to know that I get it, or we all get it, that you're in a bad situation, and we're trying to come up with a solution to fix it, but we got to do it right.
It's a whole thing. It's not just 3 people or 3 families, and I get it too. But, what are we gonna want this county to look like? That's what I think. And tonight, I feel like we're agricultural bashing. I just do. I just feel like we're jumping on agriculture. So, do we want the county to be rural, or do we not? I know how I feel about it, but, I'm kind of getting mixed messages. And like I said before, I've got caught up in this thing on 3 situations. But I didn't say a word about it. I just went ahead and I've spent, and I'm still paying on stuff. And so if I make a mistake, or if I read something wrong, or if I didn't do my due diligence, if I didn't check everybody or talk to everybody that I should have, I feel like I think it's on me. I don't feel like it's on the rest of the people. So, and maybe that's too harsh, I don't know, and I'm harsh on myself. But I'm still in the same situation, and I can tell you a situation now that's happening with me, and I think it doesn't make a bit of sense, but I went ahead and did it because that's what it was said in planning and development in the pool area. I went ahead and did it, and it cost a lot of money. So, we're all caught up in this, but I didn't expect anybody to make provisions for me. And I'm just concerned we're just going to set a precedent about this. But I understand there's situations that we do have to settle. But I'm just concerned about what direction we're going in.
I would say to you in reference to that, we've already set a precedent.
Yeah.
We've done that for 20 years. We've set a precedent for 20 years. And that's the reason I did this little partial survey that I did. Because I knew that's what I would find. And so this has gone on year after year after year after year after year. You can find every single year from 1999 all the way up to 2019 where permits were granted on acreage less than 5 acres in RA. And a lot of those were bought during those times, right when they were going to do it. I mean, so it has been an interpretation by planning directors in the past of 1.5 acres. And they have granted these permits, and they have given them the permit, and as you saw there, 76 times they built a house. Some have even moved, manufactured homes onto these less than 5 acre lots. So there's all kinds of stuff when you dig deep enough into this thing that you will find.
But do we want to perpetuate that?
Well, I think what I want to do is fix the problem. If
Well,
there
I
is a
do.
fix, we have to fix that problem, help these people out that are caught. I don't know, as she said, she read it. She interpreted it just like our planning directors in the past have interpreted it and granted permits.
See, I wouldn't
So-
go by that. I understand it, but I wouldn't go by that myself until I talk to people, but I hear what you're saying.
I think in the past too, though, they've,
No.
Jameson, like I said, you wasn't in there then, and I think it's way before even the last couple was in there.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's like,
You went to the health department, they
No.
told you the first thing you do, you go to the health department, and you get a permit for a septic tank. And we will issue you a permit to build your house. And so the health department come up there and say, yeah, you got 1.5 acres, and it perks. You got a perk test. Here's your septic tank permit, and you go down to the building department, they give you a building permit. That's just the way it happened.
this happened a lot. I mean, like I said, I only did 400
It will
and
me.
something.
I know, but it's,
It didn't move me.
Well, now,
You
you
go back and do what?
well, let's, y'all, y'all just, let us discuss it up here. All right, so I'm proposing to the board that we have a public hearing in whatever time frame Jameson says that can happen in, and that we look at what Mr. Gaines has said, maybe a hybrid of 2 and 3 or whatever it was, numbers you said, that we can do some kind of a fix here. Now, I want to make the fix permanent so that, people have an understanding in the future that RA is 5 acres. But that's not the understanding of today. But we have what, 1,378 people that are on less than 5 acre lots now that are RA, according to the documentation that we got. And I want to make sure that those people have use of their property. I mean, that's 1,378 families that have less than 5 acres in RA. Some of them may have had it for 35 years, some of them may have had it for 50 years, some of them may have had it for 5, some of them had it for 10. But they need to be able to do something with their property, whether that's, if it's one that's real old and they pass away and they sell that and it had a 1973 mobile home on it. Now somebody's taken that 1973 mobile home off of it. It's a 3 acre lot. If we don't make some kind of change here, that's 3 acre lot of useless property because they can't do nothing with it.
Would that not be grandfathered in?
Not necessarily.
It would?
If it was after 1998.
Well, I
Actually, after
1973.
1986 was when the 5 acre.
Yes.
So it actually goes all the way back to 1986. So it's a mess. And it's a mess that's got to be
the
fixed.
building codes are not grandfathered out. If they come and get a new permit, guess what?
Yeah,
They got a new standard.
we got to meet the new standards. So, and a lot of those, if Grandpa owned it, don't have a plat. They're not going to be a plat. I mean, there's all kind of land in this county that's been in families for a very long time. There ain't no plat. There may be a deed, but there's not a plat. And so, if our standard is they got to bring this man a plat that's recorded and it's less than 5 acres, they ain't never going to be able to do nothing with it. That's what we got to fix, in my opinion.
So that we may be able to give council some direction, can we collectively kind of give our ideas of what we think about 1 through 5?
Well, in fact, you could even take a motion and a vote and direct us, as to which one to pursue.
Well, and that's what I'm saying, maybe
Yeah.
poll and see which one people are leaning
But
one way or another.
before we put restrictions on though, I wanna look at what kind of, I just don't wanna, because it says, one of them says with restrictions, but what are the restrictions?
Yeah, I mean,
So,
that-
or what are the buffers?
Right, well, that needs to be decided,
Yes,
and,
I mean-
but I think if we pick an option and we start marching down that path, then we start fine tuning.
Right.
So we find that, we pick
Oh, yeah, you can
Right,
do that.
that's what I'm saying, is so we can maybe get a
I
rough
like-
idea if we're
Keep
far
changing
apart
as
or
we
if we're.
go.
somewhere-
Yeah, I'd like to research and just see what kind of buffers or,
So my opinion is I'll agree with Commissioner Gaines that maybe we look at a hybrid of number 2 and 3.
Repeat again what those are.
can council read those so we got it on
Yes,
record?
Yes,
when you-
so, option 2 was addressing this via splits, which as I'm thinking about it, and, in terms of this being just a corrective process, I guess the corrective process could be addressed through a split too. I'm not sure if you need both, I guess is what I'm saying, as a
Okay.
correction, because either
Yeah.
you would say, okay, you can split your lots into substandard parcels twice, and that achieves something for somebody. Or you say, we're gonna just allow you to be rezoned to RA 1.5. Like, I don't know if you need both, and I think that splits piece might set a rule that we're not prepared to set yet.
Well, and I go back to that because you said we needed to address that at some
I
point.
think we have to, and I think that may be something we want to address in the bigger ag consideration, because we need to talk about, we're going to specify legacy, are we going to, what is the number of splits over how many years, and do we want to modify that? We address it currently, do we want to change it? So I think we could accomplish, the correction by just going with that option number 3, which would be creating a corrective district that would be an RA variation. Perhaps we call it RA 1.5, or we could call it RA corrective. I mean, if we want to be very clear, I think as we adopt it, we would state exactly what it's for. This is for purposes of offering this corrective relief, and, when we close that thing down, it's defined and available for certain people. And then whatever those enhanced standards are, I think you would just need to tell us, but we can certainly have a fill in the blanks, about what we might want to see there.
So you're saying this is corrective action only?
That's what I
And
think.
then when this is over, whenever that is, then we would go back to the 5.
Well, and because I think, to this woman's point in the back, I also want to change the ordinance so that 1.5 isn't anywhere in RA.
Yes.
And so then at that point, it would be Commissioner Gaines, black and white. So anybody else who decides, okay, I'm going to split my 5-acre piece and give my daughter 2 acres, unless we have accommodated that in some other way,
In the future.
that's not going to be allowed.
But they could come for a rezoning.
Yes.
They could come for rezone to
Yeah.
RSR. but
I can
this-
go with the
Yeah.
corrective action, but at some point, we're gonna have to close this.
Yeah.
And not hear the excuse, I did not know.
Right.
Because I'm telling you, that's out here now.
So that would be something for y'all to tell us, is this gonna be a closed
Yes.
classification?
Yes.
Yeah, and as
Yes.
I've said, there's 2 issues, is what do we do now, and then,
That's
and I
right.
think, you said, do we wait till this is over? No, I think we run them concurrent. Let's start working on the long-range plan while we're fixing the short-range
Agreed.
plan. Let's not wait 6 months to come up with a long-range
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
We got multiple issues in RA that need to be addressed immediately, so let's work on both of them at the same time. But to your point, I like the idea of closing it down. That way
It's
we're
got
drawing the
to.
line in the sand,
Yeah.
saying, this is where we're at. We're fixing the ones that out there, give everybody the opportunity of 6 months, and I don't even know what the timeline needs to look like. But I do think from a communication standpoint, any of these addresses probably need to get a letter from us and say, this is what we're doing, just to be proactive, so we don't have anybody that can say, I didn't know about that. I don't know if that's an option or not.
And it may not be that we even close it as a matter of time. I mean, we could, we talked about a 6-month
Yeah.
grace. But then you get in the situation of having to give actual notice to people, so do you want to undertake actual notice to 1,300 people, plus or minus? Or do you want to say it's available, and when they come in to try to get that plat for grandpa's land that, he built on 40 years ago, we've got it, it's closed, but it's defined,
By that number.
Right,
These
right.
1,400.
Yeah, nobody
And-
knew would be
and
able
frankly,
to
we
get.
could take that research, it needs to be fine-tuned a little bit, and actually make it a part of the ordinance, that this is an eligible classification for
It's already
these
platted.
parcels.
Drawing that line in the sand.
I think we could do, can we nail it down to those
So to your
parcels?
point, somebody bought,
I think
after we
so.
do this, somebody bought a lot next
Think
week.
so?
It's.
Well, it'd be after you adopt the
After,
ordinance.
yeah, after we adopt it, the next week after we adopt it,
Because
that's,
if we don't do
different.
something, this is never gonna stop.
right.
So do it on the 1,400 and whatever the fine that number of actually purchased platted land.
Right. And essentially, that's the same thing that when zoning went into place, well, no, I guess they could have come back and rezoned it.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you one other thing, to the extent that we are trying to move as quickly as possible, so, Jameson said it's about a 45-day process to get the ordinance amended. Would you want to consider taking provisional applications where these individuals could file an application for this future, so that their process could track along with our ordinance
Yeah.
process? Otherwise, we got 45 days plus 45 days.
Yes.
So if you're gonna allow that, I would think I'd like you to maybe make a motion and vote on that and say, we're directing us to do this, we're gonna allow you to accept provisional applications for this new district so that they can start through the planning commission process and not be delayed further. But if the district's ultimately not approved, then those applications would just
Right.
be void.
Yeah.
But that would help them advance it 45 days faster than waiting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's opposite of what you said a minute ago, allowing them to go ahead and build and then tear it down, but.
Exactly, that
Yeah.
makes me real nervous. A provisional application, not so much. I
Yeah.
think that's just a piece of paper, but it would allow them to start through the process.
Now, are we gonna put something in there that they can only split, like, once, I
That'd
like
be-
what
that'd be
Chris
future.
That's
said?
future.
That's future.
I think
We're
we're
gonna
gonna
wait
be,
to that for future? Okay.
so these would be available for rezoning as they sit as of the date of the ordinance adoption. And I like the idea, since we've done this research, is fine tuning that and even identify, these are the parcels this applies to.
Right.
So that we're not
Because they're
having
already there.
someone come back later and argue, oh, I had already split it by that time, so it's just, it is what it is on the date of the ordinance. So there's a snapshot of the people who are in the net, and then, Commissioner Fawcett, it's closed. Now that, one of those people in the net might come up 20 years later to get a plat, and we pull open the ordinance, and there's plat, there's their parcel number, and they're in that eligibility for that classification. But otherwise, it's a closed, captioned option for people.
So those people, that 1,300 and something other, would have the opportunity to plat their property if they had not done that, obviously. And they just say they owned it, grandpa owned it for 50 years, and now grandson owns it, and it had never been platted, but they're in that 1,400 group, you can plat that and then come get their permit.
Once they rezone to this category.
Yeah, once they rezone to that category.
But to take a snapshot of all of these parcels right now and to say 20 years from now, someone can come in and do this, and not give like a 6-month timeframe, logistically, that's pretty much, I don't want to say impossible, but that is an extremely hard undertaking for the planning department to keep track of for that many years. And I say that because the tax assessor, you're talking the tax assessor information, right? So the tax assessor doesn't take into consideration any type of zoning or anything when they split parcels. All they look at is the deed and the plat.
That's
So
true.
if you wanted
That
to,
is true.
So you're
I
saying
think-
the parcel number could change?
I would say that the parcel number can change, the property owner can change, they can, essentially.
Well, then that
if I
goes
had-
back to notifying all 1,300 something of them, so that they are aware. If we're gonna set a time frame on it, then we have to notify.
Yeah, but I thought we were talking about not setting the time frame, because
Well, but he doesn't like that. But I'm saying if,
can we not record something on the title itself?
We can't do that.
I mean,
On 13, logistically, sending out 1,300 letters,
It's not
we're
ours.
going to say that they're certified.
This is-
That's a large undertaking by the.
Well, I wasn't proposing to send out letters. That's why I was saying that we would, but I understand what you're saying, is the tax parcel number could change. But my thought was, can we identify the people in the net in a snapshot?
Right.
And it wouldn't be keeping up with things, it would be like an exhibit maybe, you know, a map, just like,
Got
you
a
know, the
different
charter has a map of what your districts are for each commissioner, you know, and there's all that detail in the charter about whose districts and where the lot lines. So it would be, that was my thought, but if you're saying that's not possible, or the,
They brought us plat in there, and that plat matched, it might be a different number or something, but you can say, no, y'all split that up again, just right here. You couldn't. I mean, you're still looking at the
I
map.
guess, yeah.
The area's not gonna change.
Right, but what I'm saying is our plats that we record are much different than what the tax assessor puts on their website. We don't, that's not one and the same. I can
So
record
we
a
have-
plat, I don't have to record a plat to split my property, is what I'm essentially saying. So I could take my 10 acres and I could, for agricultural purposes, I could cut out an acre. And it would show that on the tax assessor's website tomorrow. But planning and development doesn't recognize that because we
Right.
we have to have everything come through zoning.
Yeah, well, they would still have to come and get a
Rezone.
proper plat. And maybe this is a conversation to engage Elaine Garrett in as well, because if I have parcel 2562599 as of today's date, I mean, is that number gonna change? I mean, that parcel could be
Yes.
split.
We changed the parcel numbers in the last 10 years. Probably twice.
So if we had a nice GIS software that interacted with all these different departments, could we not put something in that software that would identify?
We absolutely could.
So do we not have a nice new GIS software that's being utilized?
Our nice
Sounds like
new,
you're
all right, so our
working.
GIS software, we don't do the parcel splits in-house. We have QPublic do those, and those are strictly through the tax assessor's website. We can get that snapshot and put it into our GIS system, but like I said before, planning and development doesn't recognize, we use those parcels, but we don't call those parcels aren't the end-all be-all without plats, recorded plats. And so the numbers that are presented can't be the end-all be-all and accurate because they don't have the plats associated with them. So it's like saying that at this point in time, the planning and development is going to recognize everything that was split in QPublic as, as accurate, and that's not, we want to keep those worlds separate.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to combine the worlds, because I'm very acutely aware of, often that's a turf battle. I mean, I know it's not here, but sometimes it is, because they are just different, they are just, I'm not trying to combine the worlds. Just trying to figure out how do we identify, and maybe it's simply that, we define it as we intend to define it, and then, someone comes forward way down in the future and parcels numbers have changed, and they have to prove to the satisfaction of the planning
It's their
director
job.
that they are eligible for this opportunity. I mean, just like if someone comes forward and says, oh, I should be grandfathered, then we say, well, prove it, show us why. And so it'd be really maybe something like that they would.
It's very specific in our language that we would.
So we can take a crack at that if identifying the parcel is not accurate.
And just so I'm clear, the addressing the splits from a split perspective, that is essentially what was proposed before in the allowing one and a half split off of that property. And I mean, that's how it was essentially interpreted before.
Did it have a year's span? I mean,
It was
I thought
once
there
every
was
5 years, and that's
it
what
was
that-
ever what?
once every 5 years.
That's what I
Or
thought we already had.
Once
that.
a year for every 5 years. So you couldn't, in a
Once
5-year
a year?
span, you couldn't do more than 5 times.
Once a year.
And
That's how
then
it's
could they,
currently
remind me, could those splits be of any size? So
They
they could be substandard?
Acre and a half.
they could be an acre and a half.
That's in our subdivision regulations.
Our subdivision regulation says 5 splits in 5 years. If you do more than that, then it goes into a major subdivision where we're going to require a ton more stuff.
Right.
5 splits in 5 years would still mean that it wouldn't trigger subdivision regulations,
Right.
which is what we proposed before. So we're saying do that temporarily for a short period of time.
So that's going back to say, is that the better option, is to do splits instead of a rezone process? I think is what you're saying.
But we want to add the constraints on the rezone.
That's the problem, is you get to split to 1.5 and have no,
Yeah, constraints.
yeah.
And in my mind, we've got to have I mean, that's the flexibility. We're allowing the people that are caught in the net the flexibility to move forward, but we also have constraints.
Well, and the split piece of it would allow them to continue to perpetuate, I think. What we're trying to do is just capture the ones who are already,
Yeah.
as opposed to.
We can deal with splits later. So does anybody, any other discussion? We have a motion?
Good Lord, we've gone around
I
this thing 100 times. I make a motion that we proceed, let me get my iPad back. With option 3 for council and Jameson's team to come up with option 3 for us to consider and put forward to a public hearing. What's the timeline you guys need to develop
45
that?
days.
What'd you say?
You said 45 days.
To develop it?
No, do the
whole process.
The whole thing.
So when could we do Kristen, when can we?
I think if he was gonna take it to planning commission first, then we could hear it the first August meeting.
We could do it, the planning commission meets on Tuesday, and we could hear it on a Thursday, right?
So
Immediately
August,
following.
August
planning
6th, would that give enough time?
When does
And
planning
finish
commission
it?
meet?
And are we saying that this doesn't come back before this board before it goes to planning commission?
I thought that's what we said we had to do. We were changing the ordinance.
Well, it doesn't, I think Jameson's question is it gonna come back to a work session or something? And if in the interest of
Well, I
time.
I think we
to know what it
should, yeah, I
says.
think we should bring it back to, once we kind of define what that looks like. Because, I mean, we're giving y'all the flexibility to put the constraints in it, and I think we would want to have some input on that.
Yeah, and I would love it, Tim said you were gonna do some research, I'd love it if y'all would give us that input, what your thoughts are, because I mean, Jameson will have a better idea, but I wouldn't know what you would want there in terms of setbacks and such. What we could do though is if we said, I mean, we could get a draft out, I guess, and start running the ads. I mean, it's just a matter of how much you want to try to expedite it. I mean, I think we probably need a couple of weeks for us to draft something and then let y'all get one crack at it. So you could go, oh my God, that's not at all what we want, before we put it out.
Can you have that done in the next 2 weeks?
Can we have a pretty good rough draft in 2 weeks? Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
so.
So why don't we put that back on,
2 weeks from now?
2 weeks from now for us to look at the actual draft of it and then hold the public hearing. And from there, then we can make any adjustments and we'll go ahead and advertise.
And the public hearing would be in August.
Yeah.
So when would the planning commission public hearing be?
That would be July 21st. Does that sound right? July 21st, public hearing with planning commission.
Is that a Tuesday?
Yes, sir.
So we couldn't hear that on the 23rd? Because that would be our meeting day, right?
That's an off week for you. Your July meetings are July 2nd and July 16th.
So it'll be the 1st of August.
Oh, the way the days fell.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, have you, back to your motion, I want to make sure, is this out of line? Are you talking about the corrected zoning district?
Correct,
Or
yeah.
not?
Yes, so I would.
And that entails these enhanced performance plans, is that
Right.
what you're going for?
Yeah, so my motion in a nutshell, I'm gonna go back and restate it, but just for
Yeah,
clarification purpose would
I
be,
lost
the motion would be to move forward with council and Jameson to look at option 3, which is create a corrective zoning district with a time period that may need to be installed in order to draw that line in the sand.
Okay, okay.
And then for them to bring back that verbiage for us to look at in 2 weeks. And then from that, move forward with a public hearing. And this is just for a corrective action for those that are within the net, that we're going to call it. And we can define that by however we legally need to define it, 1,400, or however we need to identify those. And then bring it back to a public hearing, run it through planning and zoning in July, and then in front of us is the first meeting we can after that. And then I guess the second part of my motion would be for planning and zoning and council to also be looking at identifying resolutions to a permanent move forward, so we can clearly define that language, so we don't have this problem
Yes.
moving forward. And then maybe bring that back. That's gonna take some time to do it right. And I think we're also running concurrent with the other RA stuff that we're trying to juggle. So that might be a couple month process in order to get that right. But it would be nice for us to get that language changed as soon as possible.
But that's not gonna be that hard, is it?
Which language?
I'm talking about like
About the 1.5 and the
Oh, yeah, that'll
That's
come
what I,
out in what we're doing, round one, that'll come out round one.
Yeah, so if we can, at that point,
That'll come out
Nail
round
that
one,
down.
just sort of the other global, how to deal with splits, how to deal with legacy, how to deal with the
Yeah.
special events, that would be sort of a phase two.
right. Is that clear?
Make it work.
Well, and just to be clear, we're gonna bring it back to a work session, we're gonna go ahead and proceed so that the advertisements hit, so that we can hit July 21st with an ultimate decision August 6th.
And I'm also, to your point earlier, if we want to take provisionals, I'm okay with that, as long as they're very clear when we give those out, that it's very clear it's a provisional and it is not leaning one way or another.
Not
It's got
entitled
to
to
be,
rely upon.
yeah, it's got to be tied back to an official vote by this board in some period of time. And that just needs to be very clear.
That's part of your motion.
Is that a third-party motion?
Yes.
Okay. So we have a three-part motion?
so that's for provisional.
Yeah.
Correct.
Provisional application.
Provisional, they go ahead and file a provisional application.
You get in the process.
Get in the
Have
process.
you got this?
You got it.
I'm beginning to wonder.
I'm worried about Kristen this
I'm
year.
ready.
She's got it recorded.
You got it? Yeah, you got it.
I do.
All right, do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Gaines, seconded by Commissioner Satterfield. Any more discussion? Hearing none, please vote by show of hands. And that's approved 4-0. Okay. Next up, we have consideration to move forward with a public hearing for Dawson County Minimum Standard Code Amendment to include mobile manufactured homes. Jameson brought that to us. Any other information needed?
Oh, can he give us a little synopsis of that?
Absolutely. Make sure I'm on the right page here, I apologize. We're talking about the minimum standards code. Yes.
Yes.
For mobile homes. So basically, this just adds language into our already existing minimum standard codes, which is our standard building codes for everything.
Okay,
And this will address mobile homes specifically,
okay.
and how they move in and how we inspect them, and it kind of gives them a list and a rundown of inspections as to what we do off-site as well as on-site to make sure that these are up to standards. It's something that's not listed in our ICC codes, our International Code Council codes, which are the state codes.
And this is just to move forward, you have to have a public hearing on
This will
this?
need a public hearing as well.
You're changing the order.
We're updating the ordinance, so we'll have to go to public hearing.
Well, I make a motion, we go forward with the public hearing.
We have a motion by Commissioner Fawcett,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Nix. Discussion.
Item 2, real quick. No age restrictions on manufactured homes, but I assume that the requirements that are going to be in place, that they have to be sound condition, is going to weed out some of the, it's a moot point to put age restrictions when you.
I think age restrictions is actually a state requirement, yeah, standards, but we do require them to have certain standards.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, please vote by show of hands. That's approved 4-0. Next up, we have consideration of appointment of the building official as a local government agent for the purposes defined in the Abandoned Mobile Home Act. Jameson brought that. Any other information needed on that? Basically,
Who is this building official?
him.
It's you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Building official, chief marshal, plan director.
Dog catcher. Chief cooking ball.
Dog catcher.
Mayor, was there earlier this week. So, absolutely.
Okay.
My only thing was, and I'd mentioned coordination with tax assessor and making sure that we're trying to be efficient with one visit
Yes,
if we
I
can. and
spoke
things
to
like
Elaine about that. She, basically, they go out, they look and just make sure that it's got the correct stamp on it and that someone's living it.
Windshield inspection.
Yes.
that. Maybe you could do that for them and just add that to your plan.
Sure.
Any other information needed? Motions?
Motion to approve Jameson to be the official for purpose of defined and abandoned mobile home.
Motion by Commissioner Satterfield,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Fawcett. Discussion. Hearing none, please vote by show of hands. And that's approved 4-0. Next up, we have consideration to move forward with a public hearing for updated planning commission terms. As you know, they all run out at the same time, and we want to fix that. And so Jameson has brought a proposal to do that. And so, any other information needed? Motions?
Motion move forward with the public hearing.
Motion by Commissioner Fawcett, second by Commissioner Gaines. Discussion. Hearing none, please vote by show of hands. That's approved 4-0. Next up, consideration of board appointments. We have first the Vita Community Partners, Angela Brown. This is a reappointment, July 20th, 2020 through June 2023. Any other information needed? Reappointment.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Commissioner Nix,
Second.
second by Commissioner Satterfield. Discussion. Hearing none, please vote by show of hands. That's approved 4-0. Next up, we have Department of Family and Children's Services, Tina Brady. This is a reappointment, July 2020 through June 2025. Any other information needed? Motion.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Commissioner Fawcett,
Second.
second by Commissioner Gaines. Discussion. Hearing none, please vote by show of hands. That's approved 4-0. Next up, we have reappointment of Betsy McGriff, GMRC Council, term July 2020 to June 2021. And I would propose that in that motion that we do the 2-year, this is alternate after 2 years, which this would be the second year for her. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Gaines,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Nix. Discussion. Hearing none, please vote by show of hands. That's approved 4-0. Next up, we have the CAJC/CJCC grant that was presented to you tonight, where they're going for $51,000, I believe she said. No match to the county. They already have that part covered. 75-25. Any other information needed there? Motion.
Motion to approve to apply for the grant.
Motion by Commissioner Satterfield,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Gaines. Discussion. Hearing none, please vote by show of hands. That's approved 4-0. We do, no one signed up for public comment in this segment.
No, sir.
We do have the need for a brief executive session. Okay.
Can I butt in? Is it appropriate for me to make a comment in the public comment section?
Yeah, you can make a comment.
I just wanted to encourage everybody. I talked to Julie today about contacting Kevin Tanner or anybody else you want to about the fact that proposal to close DFAC's office here in the county. And I know they're like us, they have all these things coming at them about budgets, but I'm telling you, what's going to happen to the children? I think families are under attack, and so please, You know, I've called, I think you were gonna call, so I just encourage everybody, and Billy, you probably called, I think.
I agree with you.
Yeah, let's just advocate for the children.
All right. Like I said, we do have the necessity for a brief executive session. I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Satterfield, second by Commissioner Nix. Discussion. Hearing none, please vote by show of hands. Show of hands, and that's approved 4-0. All right, so that's all the business we have for the day. Thank you for your attendance.